Hi, you've been scrolling for some time now. You're likely feeling pretty overwhelmed. There's been a lot of information bombarding your brain and you're likely feeling quite groggy as well. But that's okay. There's no judgment here. We're living in a world which is designed to keep your attention hooked on social media platforms. So let's take a moment. Let's take a breath together. How are you feeling right now? You might feel as if you've wasted the last few hours of your time, but again, don't worry. There's no judgment here. If you give me your attention for the next few minutes, I promise to repay you with the knowledge of how to navigate this modern world so that it serves you instead of you serving it. Because this feeling of being overwhelmed and having your brain zapped has been going on for some time now, hasn't it? My name's Lewis. It's a pleasure to have you here. This video will not include any high dopamine edits or large pieces of information for you to remember. It's simply going to be me and you in front of a whiteboard distilling a full conscious manual you can use to return you to a feeling of peace, calmness, health and happiness, and so you can stop being a slave to technology. First of all, we're going to cover how we're all being fed a low consciousness existence by big tech companies, and then we're going to cover the 6 steps to calmness so you can live a life of clarity and intention. Again, it's a pleasure to have you here. Let's walk through these points now. Okay, how are we being fed a low consciousness existence from the big tech companies? Well, I don't want to overwhelm your mind with hard to grasp concepts from neuroscience, so this is going to be as simple as possible. Now, the way our modern world is set up, with the lack of nature we all get, and the instant access we have to powerful technology and addictive junk food, is all catering to one region of the brain, the amygdala. The amygdala is a tiny part of your brain responsible for processing emotions such as fear and anxiety. And when this brain region is triggered, we are pulled into the present moment, compelled to act on our impulses and desires. Now, the big tech companies understand if they can trigger our amygdala, where we feel pulled into the present moment and compelled to act on things that feel triggering and urgent enough to pursue now, we will scroll our lives into oblivion. But it's important to note, in those moments in your life where you feel calm, clear, rational, and as if your action is directed towards a goal you've previously set, that is when you're engaging a brain region called the prefrontal cortex, which is this front part of your brain. And the cool thing is, the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala are always communicating, because the amygdala needs to let the prefrontal cortex know if there's any dangers or threats in the environment, and the prefrontal cortex needs to calm the amygdala down when it's going a bit haywire. But modern technology is isolating the amygdala from the prefrontal cortex, which is why we feel so consistently anxious, despairing, and fried when we go on social media. This discommunication between the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala is no different from having a 3-year-old child not have their parent around to regulate their impulses and desires. A child left alone is going to make some impulsive decisions. We inhibit our prefrontal cortex when we scroll, hence you rarely get that feeling of, no, this is wrong, I should stop doing this, when you're scrolling into oblivion. But you've felt it before, I'm sure. That feeling of calmness, having a sense of direction, having a sense of clarity and awareness in your life, and not feeling triggered and pulled into the present moment. Well, this is all we need to do. We just need to engage this brain region more to return you to this feeling that you felt before. And this is what we're going to do now. But first, we need to reclaim consciousness. To escape our amygdala-charged existence, we need courage. I say we because it's not just you. I deal with this as well. We need the courage to decide we don't just have one choice. We don't have to scroll. We don't have to self-soothe through technology. It might take time and a lot of bravery, but with time we can choose to say no to something that makes our mental health worse. To engage the process of unhooking yourself, I'm not going to simply say stop scrolling, because that's unhelpful. Instead, I want you to do something which will seem counterintuitive. Think about the technological habits you have right now which are negatively affecting your mental health. And I want you to set a window throughout your day where you're only allowed to do those things within that window. For example, 2 of your habits might be not watching YouTube videos to completion and mindlessly scrolling on Instagram. So the window becomes you can only do these 2 things between the hours of 7 and 8 p.m. Any time you spend throughout the day which isn't engaging in these habits, replace for other things which are much more beneficial. These are what I'd suggest. Walking, reading, talking to yourself out loud, socialising, rediscover an old hobby. You can do these if you want, you can implement your own ones, be as creative as you want, but I encourage you to do this for the next week and see how it goes, because you might notice some interesting observations. Perhaps you notice that some days it's easier to stick to the rule than others. Maybe some days you'll disregard the rule completely. If you do, don't judge yourself, because this is a work in progress. Remember, these technological habits you have right now, you've ingrained in your psyche for God knows how many years. Again, no judgment, but it will just take some time to unhook yourself from them. Instead, look at your behaviour through the lens of a curious scientist, not an angry drill sergeant. And after the window week of unhooking yourself is finished, you might then want to take your reclaiming consciousness one step further. And for the next 3 days, you abstain from all social media completely. When you spend your few days completely away from social media, choosing depth instead of the shallows, consider these. What did you notice? How uncomfortable did you feel? And did you feel you were missing out on anything? Over these few days, you might notice you feel more connected to yourself, your surroundings, and in your conversations. But you might feel very uncomfortable during these few days. You likely won't feel over the moon. Your return to connection will be a gradual process where your feelings of discomfort and emotions you've long kept repressed begin to be revealed to you, which leads us into point number 3. Emotions are what we block when we scroll, because we're giving ourselves an external focus, meaning that we can ignore everything that is arising upwards internally. But this only leads to one place. A feeling of dissociation, where we feel disconnected to the world we live in and our internal psychological world. But as you begin to reclaim consciousness and unhook yourself from technology, I want to encourage you to do one thing. Allow yourself to feel whatever emotions arise within you in the absence of technology. Because great courage is an ability to sit with your emotions and thoughts in full acceptance without trying to escape them. Because if you're anything like me, then you use technology as a way to escape your emotions. But I want to tell you one thing. Emotions aren't as bad as they seem. We're just a little bit inexperienced with dealing with them. So here's a few ways you can emotionally self-regulate when you're unhooking yourself from technology. Again, another thing you might like to do is go on long walks and talk to yourself out loud. Have open and honest conversations with people you trust. Non-judgmental awareness is where you might get yourself into a comfortable position and close your eyes and just notice whatever arises within you without labeling it in your head. Expand your emotional vocabulary. Again, I'm going to put on the screen the wheel of emotions which you can screenshot to use in those moments to help you label your emotions when they're going a bit haywire, which helps you calm them down. And lastly, write letters to yourself, as if you're writing to a friend. On the point of friendship, I would like you to become a better friend to yourself and for you to start judging the progress of your days based on whether you have become a better friend to yourself that day. And the last thing I want to say about emotions is invite the fire. A lot of the confusion which arises in our life is a consequence of us not feeling things to the depths. So bring it on. Don't back out. If you feel lonely, sad, depressed, grief or anger, go to the depths of those emotions and see what it really means to feel that thing all the way to its extreme. And you will see that there is great wisdom lying within your intuitions. Those pulses of insight that you get come to you at random moments. And then you'll start to see a lot of the advice you get online is mostly unnecessary, because all you need to do is unplug and listen to the messages already inside your intuition. And by tapping into your emotions, you're able to improve your life. For example, you might notice in your time away from social media that you feel a overwhelming feeling of sadness. If you probe deeper into this emotion, you might start to learn something from it. that there's something unprocessed from your past, a relationship or something that happened to you, or you haven't grieved about something, or you might feel an overwhelming sense of loneliness, which gives you the opportunity to realise you was using social media to escape this feeling, but by listening to this feeling, you're able to productively meet your social needs in the real world. Speaking of loneliness, point number 4, rediscovering solitude. It's important to differentiate between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is a feeling of missing out on the connections that we want to create in the future, but we don't yet have, whereas solitude is a feeling of returning home, rediscovering yourself like a long-lost friend. But when you unplug from social media, you will likely feel lonely, because the pseudo, as I like to call them, connections that you were engaging in online are no longer as readily available. But you're not missing out on anything. You don't have to go on social media to check up on what everyone is doing all of the time, because you are going to replace your pseudo connection with real connection. Connection to yourself. Connection in conversation with other people. Hey man, I've missed you. Because you now feel present in your conversations. You likely will feel lonely after you unplug from social media because your dopamine levels need to go back down to baseline, but in order to do so, they usually go below baseline in order to come back up to maintain a homeostasis. But it's not just through socializing that we rebuild this feeling of connection, because as we embrace nature more, we start to embrace the connectedness of us to the real world. And lastly, a bit more of a philosophical realization I had the other day: you're only as lonely as you are disconnected to yourself. So cultivate solitude and replace loneliness for real-world connection. Now there's only 2 more points we're going to cover, and then we're going to be gone. Everything we've covered so far is great, but it can be undermined if we don't implement deeper ways to rest in our lives. But most of the messages hustle culture feeds us online is do bigger things, be more ambitious, achieve more, get a bigger house, get a more beautiful partner, earn more money, more. And ambition is great if your ladder is up against the right wall. But striving for things just because other people have them is all of what contributes to our feelings of despair when we're online. So as you begin awakening to your feelings of connection, you need to learn how to rest and to not feel guilty about it. As the saying goes, don't quit, learn how to rest. We need to replace the feelings of depletion we used to get from social media for genuine restoration. Here are some things that work for me. Spoiler alert, I've mentioned some of them already. Walking through my local woods, having conversations with my mum and friends, going on a bike ride, working out, reading, meditation and napping, and getting adequate sleep. Find what makes you feel more restored after you do it rather than depleted. And don't feel guilty for resting. Because as I learned once, the consistent plan you follow is much better than the perfect plan you abandon. Now I've saved my favourite till last, so let's finalise with point number 6. Now you've likely seen videos like this one before, where someone on the internet is telling you to stop scrolling so much, so you unplug, have a few good days, but then you fall right back into your habits of scrolling. And I would argue the reason you fall back into your habits of scrolling, again no judgment, is because you didn't instill a framework or a philosophy for your actions going forward. So this is the last point I would encourage you to do. After you've unhooked yourself, understood how we are being fed a low consciousness existence, and then you gradually aim to reclaim your consciousness, you now need to instill your philosophy of life. And I've come up with my own philosophy called The Deep Life, which I'm going to share with you now because I think you'll find some aspects of it interesting. So feel free to absorb what is useful, discard what is not, add what is uniquely your own to your own philosophy, as Bruce Lee would say, as we're going through this. The Deep Life was born out of an understanding that what we're searching for is depth. We realised when we were scrolling that we didn't actually like scrolling. We didn't enjoy the YouTube videos we were watching. We didn't care much about the Instagram posts that we saw. What we wanted was stillness and depth. So the 4 virtues that comprise the deep life are curiosity, to follow your interests, creativity, to express what your interests led you to find, courage, to sit with your thoughts and emotions in silence, in full acceptance, without trying to escape them, and finally, restoration, to replenish your energy in a way that restores rather than depletes you. If you're wondering, in all of the videos I've been making, what these pieces of paper are, it's everything I'm drawing on the board now. The Deep Life is a philosophy where you aim to uphold these virtues every single day. And some of the activities that comprise the Deep Life could be 8+ hours of sleep, wake up early, morning and evening sunlight, work on a challenging project, 1 times training session per day, nutritious and high protein eating, watch 1 YouTube video from a selective playlist if I want to, 1 hour per day in nature, all lights and screens off by 8, evening introspection and journaling, 15 minutes meditation, no porn, no scrolling, and no high dopamine music, just nice relaxing soundtracks. If you're going to embark on this specific philosophy or cultivate your own in your own unique way, I want to give you one warning. Instilling these things in your day, which I did, and I was ticking them off each day, will bring you the most amount of stillness, clarity, and serenity you've ever felt in your life. But all of this change at once can be quite scary for your amygdala. So don't worry about easing yourself into this philosophy, okay? Take it day by day and make sure you don't do something like this alone. Don't use it as another opportunity to isolate yourself. It's so easy to isolate yourself nowadays, especially with what we see online for us young people and, you know, people of all ages. Lock in, go all in, go into monk mode and all of this stuff. I've done this alone and it wasn't very fun. 3 days in, I was thinking, Jesus Christ, I need a hug and I need to speak to some people. So doing this around other people is great if you already have those connections fostered. Be careful about doing these things completely alone, devoid of human connection. And the last thing I want to say is that the Deep Life is an understanding that our quality of mind is a consequence of our decisions and what we choose to pay attention to. And it's an understanding that most shiny objects in the modern world promise happiness and contentment, but they actually give us depletion and despair. So as we bring this video to a close, there's one book I'm going to recommend you, which is Digital Minimalism by Cal Newport. This is what sparked my journey to engage in all of this stuff. But before we go, let's take one last breath. And remember, it's not your fault that these technology companies are vying for your attention and want to keep you hooked. But it is your responsibility for how you manage your technology use. But there's no reason to hate yourself, and there's no judgment, because it's time to give yourself the depth that you are searching for. Stay disciplined, playful, and dangerous. Adios, muchachos y muchachas.